Oh, hello. My name is Mara and welcome to Books Like Whoa. We're here, guys. This is the last video in Mission Marple. Yeah, it's been a journey. We have been on this road since January. It is now August. This is my last book review as a part of Mission Marple, though you will be seeing in 2 weeks' time my wrap up, my where to start with, like the whole bow on the Mission Marple experience will be going up in 2 weeks. But for those of you who may not know what Mission Marple is and have just happened upon this video, hello, welcome. This is a read-along project that I am doing wherein I discuss all of the Miss Marple oeuvre. I read them in chronological order in terms of when they were published, and we have come upon this last one, which is Miss Marple's Final Cases. This is a collection of short stories that are not connected in any way. They're just sort of like a little grab bag, and this was actually the last book published for Agatha Christie, at least by Collins Crime Club in 1979. So a momentous book closing out the oeuvre of one of the most important writers of the 20th century. If you are new to these reviews, just so you know, generally what I would do is give you a plot synopsis, roundup about to where we find a body. I would talk about characters and themes and sort of my non-spoilery thoughts, and then get into spoilers after that. Because this is a collection of short stories, and because these are not interlinked really in any meaningful way, I am not going to be doing any plot synopsizing today. I am really going to be talking just sort of about my general impressions. I will give you where I think this falls in the overall ranking, but then I will probably transition pretty quickly into full spoiler territory, and that is because I think to really discuss any of these short stories with any depth would give more away than I really want to, just because it's a short story. There's not a lot there to work with as it is, so I feel like you should really just read it and discover it for yourself. So with all that being said, let me give you sort of my general impressions, ranking, and then we'll dive into some discussion. Okay, so general impression of this book was I liked it. It was perfectly pleasant. It was a very nice little collection of short stories, and you guys have heard me say before that I think that Miss Marple works particularly well in the short story form. So I think that this basically was a book that was very well suited to what Miss Marple is, how she acts in her books. It's a good format for her, basically. So I enjoyed pretty much all of these. I definitely enjoyed some more than others, and I will say that as a whole, I personally much prefer the other short story collection in the Miss Marple oeuvre, and that is The 13 Problems, which is the second book actually in the Miss Marple canon. I just personally think that it is better. I just personally find that it is more interesting. The fact that The 13 Problems has a through line, they are interconnected, and I think that over the course of that collection you were really learning something about who Miss Marple is and kind of her values, how she thinks about things, how people around her perceive her. I just find that dynamic and that sort of macro arching connection to be something that really adds in terms of my enjoyment of the short stories that she's in. So for me, for my money, I don't like this one as much as The 13 Problems, which I think I gave a 4.5 star to. This is a collection I would give more like a 3.5 star to, because there are some stories in here that I really enjoyed and that I think are really strong. Some of the standouts in terms of quality, I would say, would be Greenshaw's Folly and The Tape Measure Murder. And then in terms of just my personal preference, I absolutely loved Strange Jest, and we will get into that in the more spoilery part of this. But so there were ones that I really liked and ones that I could tell you objectively I thought were of good quality. That being said, I do think that there were some duds in this collection, or ones that I just don't think really work very well. I would say notably to me, Miss Marple Tells a Story was kind of a stinker, and a couple of other ones. So I think that there's just a lot more variability in the quality of this particular collection, and it just does, in my opinion, sort of suffer for not having something more that it's doing with Miss Marple in this book. But that being said, it is perfectly pleasant, and I definitely think in terms of a last book to close out your experience with Miss Marple, this definitely will leave you with a better taste in your mouth than if you ended, for instance, with Nemesis. So I kind of liked having something that was really Miss Marple, being kind of showcased and showed off, I think, in her most natural milieu, both in terms of the format of the short story, but also because these stories are so based in village life. I think that it's just fun to see a lot of characters that we know and love in these short stories. So you get some Raymond West, you get some Jane Hellier, you get the townspeople. So I just think that is very enjoyable and a really nice way to kind of cap off a Marple read. So in terms of where I would put this collection, I would put it kind of somewhere in the middle. It's probably my favorite of my 3.5-star Marples. I forget exactly what number I ended up putting it at, but somewhere kind of in the middle to like lower middle. Something that I would definitely recommend, I think you should read if you are a fan of Christie. You will not be disappointed, but not to me or to my mind like a real standout in the Miss Marple canon or the overall firmament of Christie short stories, though like I said, I do think that there's a couple in here that are notable among the short story canon for Christie. So those are kind of my spoiler-free, just general impressions and thoughts. If you are leaving me here, we will meet back up again in 2 weeks, and I will give you my recommendation of where I think you should start with Miss Marple, my overall kind of like rankings and impressions, some themes, and general wrap-up. So I will see you then if you need to leave me here. If you're staying for spoilers, keep watching. Okay, only a few sort of spoilery type things I wanted to mention. So first of all, I absolutely loved Strange Jest. That was far and away my favorite story in this collection. And that is because it was just so campy. Like, I just found like the whole treasure hunting conceit is really fun. It reminded me very much of The Missing Will, which is a Hercule Poirot short story. And I just loved how Miss Marple is sort of like needling at / maybe like trolling these two kind of like hip young kids who have exhausted all of their mental and physical resources trying to find this money. I just really enjoyed watching her sort of like poke at them. It made me laugh out loud. I also love like what like a crazy weirdo both her uncle and their uncle were, because like I love how they're just writing off the fact that these guys are utter bizarre people to the fact that they're just like old bachelors. I don't know what the implication there is, that like if you don't get married, you'll just go nuts. I don't know, but it was very funny to me. I very much enjoyed that one. In terms of like textbook Christie short stories, like I said, I think to my mind, The Tape Measure Murder and Greenshaw's Folly are both ones that are very Christie. I don't like The Tape Measure Murder's title because it tells you, like, it gives you a vital clue or like almost whodunit in the title, which I always don't enjoy. I think it originally had a different name. I don't remember, but I don't like that that's what it was called, at least in my edition. But it, you know, it captures village life so charmingly, and I think it just is, yeah, it feels very Marple, as does The Case of the Perfect Maid, which is not, again, that probably should be up there in terms of like textbook Christie. I personally didn't really like that one very much. I don't know why, it just didn't strike me particularly well. The other one that I do think is a standout is Greenshaw's Folly, and I really enjoyed that. I remember when it was sort of rediscovered a few years ago, what kind of a ruckus it stirred up. And again, it is very Christie. I think as soon as you see somebody in a distinctive outfit or with like a distinctive feature that could go away or be transferable, you should probably be looking for that person to not be themselves at some point. So like, if you know Christie, I think that's kind of a tell. But again, I think that it's a very fun short story, and I think it plays with this like perception of costuming in a very fun way. So it's a very good short story. I'll say that I think a lot of people like The Case of the Caretaker, and when I was reading about these short stories, it's often pointed out that Christie liked this so much that she sort of expanded it into the book Endless Night. I think the fact that I am one of the few people who doesn't really like Endless Night probably is part of why I didn't really like that short story. I just find both that short story and the actual book quite overwrought and not very fun. Like, it feels very melodramatic basically to me, and I don't really enjoy that tone in a Christie. At least for my money, it's just not my favorite. Yeah, there's some different type stories in here, like the Dressmaker's Doll one is kind of much more ooky spooky than Christie usually goes. I think Sanctuary, I mean, I had some affection for it just because I recently read The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Sanctuary is a very prominent thing in that book, obviously. So I kind of like that, but it wasn't really a standout to me. It felt more like Marple as a thriller, and I just don't know that she's super well suited to that. Kind of a similar criticism as to what I had for At Bertram's Hotel, that it felt more like one of her action-adventure type stories, and I just don't really like Marple in that setting. So yeah, overall, like I said, I feel like there were some ups and downs. Overall, some good ones in here, but I guess I just don't find this particularly memorable, especially compared to the 13 Problems. Okay, so that will do it for this review. Quite short, I apologize for that, but that is kind of part of a short story collection. It can be a little tricky to have a lot of meaty conversation about this, but as I was saying earlier, stay tuned because I think our last Mission Marple video will be a nice wrap up, kind of talking about what we have learned during this here reread, my impressions, recommendations on where to start, all of that good stuff. So if you have read this book, definitely let me know what you think in the comments. You can also check out our Goodreads group, which is linked in the description. Let me know what you thought about this one. Especially, I would be interested to hear how people feel about it relative to the 13 Problems, because I think people kind of fall into one camp or the other. I am a 13 Problems kind of gal, but I can, appreciated a spirited rallying cry for this particular collection, so definitely feel free to leave that below. And I think that will do it. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all of that information listed in the description box below. And yeah, that will do it. Hope you're having an absolutely lovely day, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!